When I lost my job, she stopped seeing me as her husband. When I lost my title, she stopped calling me by my name. But what she didn't know was that the man she abandoned was about to inherit everything her family ever wanted. The evening was quiet, but inside Chinedu's heart, there was a storm he could no longer hide. He walked slowly through the streets of Lagos, his briefcase feeling heavier than ever before. The company he had given 7 years of his life to had collapsed that morning. No warning, no severance, just a short meeting and the words, "We're sorry, Chinedu." As he opened the door to his home, the smell of Amira's favorite perfume greeted him, but not her warmth. She sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, the light from the screen reflecting off her blank face. When he quietly said, "I lost my job today," she didn't even blink. She just sighed and said coldly, "So what's the plan now? How will we keep this house?" Her tone was sharp, as if he had chosen to fail. The woman who once prayed with him now questioned his worth like a stranger. Chinedu tried to explain how it wasn't his fault, how he would find another way, but Amira's silence spoke louder than her words. It was the silence of disappointment, of someone already turning away. That night, he sat alone in the living room. The lights were off, the room dimly lit by the flicker of streetlights sneaking through the window. On the table in front of him stood their wedding photo, two people smiling, full of dreams, full of faith. He stared at it for a long time, tracing Amira's smiling face with his finger. He remembered how she once told him, "Even if we have nothing, we'll have each other." Now it felt like a cruel joke as he looked around the house. Every corner reminded him of promises they had built together. Promises now cracking under the weight of failure. His phone buzzed, a message from an old friend asking how he was doing. He couldn't even reply. Words felt too heavy. He whispered to himself, "When did love become a transaction? When did I stop being enough?" Outside, Lagos buzzed with life. Cars honking, people laughing, the world moving on. But inside that small apartment, something inside Chinedu quietly broke. And in that silence he realized losing his job wasn't the real loss. He was losing his marriage, one cold glance at a time. The days began to blend into one another, heavy and gray. Chinedu would wake up early, dress neatly as if he still had somewhere to go, and sit quietly at the dining table with his cup of tea. Amira would walk past him without a word, her perfume lingering longer than her presence. The warmth that once filled their mornings had vanished. She no longer asked if he'd eaten, no longer smiled when he tried to make small talk. The woman who once danced with him in the kitchen now looked at him like he was an inconvenience she couldn't wait to escape. Online, however, Amira's life looked perfect. She began posting pictures of expensive lunches, designer bags, and smiling selfies with captions like, "Grateful for the blessings." People commented with heart emojis and praise, calling her goals. But behind every filter and fake smile was a woman running from the truth that her marriage was sinking, and she was too proud to admit it. Chinedu noticed the changes. The distance between them wasn't just emotional anymore. It had turned physical. She stopped coming home early. Some nights she didn't come home at all, saying she was helping her mother with business. But he knew where she truly was, anywhere but beside him. At her mother's mansion, Madame Zainab Dinladi watched her daughter complain about how tired she was of living with the jobless man. Zainab, sharp and cold, sipped her tea before replying in that familiar, cutting tone. "You married for love, but love doesn't pay bills. Think smart, Amira. A man without money is just a burden waiting to drag you down." Her words wrapped around Amira like poison disguised as wisdom. Amira nodded slowly, her pride outweighing her loyalty. When she returned home, her tone had changed. She no longer said, "We." It was always "you." "You should be looking for work. You're making me look bad." Chinedu tried to stay calm, to remind her that storms pass. But she wasn't listening anymore. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt colder than the rain outside. At night, Chinedu lay awake beside a woman who slept facing away from him, her phone glowing long after midnight. That glow became a wall between them, and soon even silence felt too loud. It was late evening when Chinedu came home earlier than usual. The sky outside was gray, heavy with rain, and the house was filled with a strange silence. He stopped near the bedroom door when he heard her voice. Cold, sharp, and full of frustration. I can't keep living like this. He's become a failure. The words hit him like a slap. For a moment he couldn't move. His chest tightened, and he felt something inside him crumble. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. When Amira noticed him standing there, she didn't even look guilty. She just ended the call slowly and turned her eyes toward him. Eyes that once loved him but now carried only boredom. Amira, he said softly, his voice trembling. Is that how you really see me? She crossed her arms and looked away. I'm tired, Chinedu. Tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. I want a divorce. He blinked as if trying to wake from a bad dream. After everything we've built? After all we've shared? Her voice was flat, her tone like ice. I refuse to sink with you. I need to move on. The words sliced through him deeper than any knife. He had stood by her when she had nothing, when her mother doubted their love, when the world laughed at their small beginnings. Now the woman he had protected, loved, and prayed for was walking away because he had fallen on hard times. That night, the house felt emptier than ever. She didn't shout, she didn't cry. She simply packed her designer bags, choosing her clothes carefully as if preparing for a holiday, not an ending. Chinedu sat on the couch watching her fold away their memories, the scarf he bought her, the frame from their honeymoon, the picture that used to hang proudly on their wall. Before dawn she was gone. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the quiet house like a final goodbye. Chinedu sat there long after sunrise, staring at the chair she always used, the faint scent of her perfume still in the air. It wasn't just his wife that left that night. It was the dream of a love he thought would last forever. As the days turned into weeks after Amira's departure, Chinedu's life sank into quiet solitude. The house was too big now, every corner echoing with memories of laughter that no longer existed. Yet, amid the silence, one man's words still lived in his heart: Chief Musa Dunladi, his late father-in-law. Before Chief Musa's death, Chinedu had spent many evenings by his hospital bedside. While others were too busy calculating what they'd inherit, Chinedu came simply to sit, to listen, to pray. The old man had seen something rare in him. Not wealth, not power, but honor. One night, as the machines around them beeped softly, Chief Musa had turned his frail head and whispered, Chinedu, my boy, life will test you. People will turn their backs when the rain comes. But when they do, stand taller. You are the son I never had. Those words had struck deep. Chinedu remembered holding the old man's hand as he smiled weakly, the light in his eyes fading with peace. At the funeral, Chinedu stood quietly behind the family, unseen, while Amira and her mother wept in front of cameras, pretending a closeness they hadn't lived in years. After the burial, life moved on, at least for them. Madame Zainab and Amira focused on their businesses, on maintaining appearances, while Chinedu stayed in the background, unnoticed. What Amira didn't know was that before Chief Musa passed, he had called Chinedu privately to the family estate and had made him promise something: to keep faith no matter how dark things got. Now, months later, that promise was about to bear fruit. One hot Lagos afternoon, as Chinedu sat in his small rented apartment wondering what his next step in life should be, his phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Mr. Balogun, Dunladi and Sons Legal Chambers. Chinedu frowned, unsure why the family lawyer would be calling him. When he answered, the voice on the other end was calm but firm. Mr. Eze, the lawyer said, the late Chief Musa's will has been finalized. You've been requested to attend the reading. For a moment Chinedu said nothing. He looked up toward the sky, remembering the old man's words, and a strange feeling stirred in his chest, as if destiny was finally clearing its throat. Something was about to change, and this time, it would shake the world that had turned its back on him. 2 weeks after the divorce papers were filed, Chinedu's phone buzzed in the middle of the night. It was an unfamiliar number, one that carried a tone of authority even before he picked up. Mr. Eze? The voice on the other end asked calmly. This is Barrister Balogun, Chief Musa Dunladi's lawyer. I need you to come to my office immediately. It's regarding the late chief's will. Chinedu's heart pounded. He had almost forgotten about the old man, his father-in-law, who had once treated him like a son before the chaos began. Memories of those quiet afternoons in the chief's garden came rushing back. The laughter, the advice, the unexpected kindness from a man who saw beyond class and pride. Now that man was gone, and yet somehow his voice was calling Chinedu back from the darkness. When Chinedu arrived at the lawyer's office, everything felt surreal. The air was heavy, the curtains drawn, and on the desk lay a brown envelope sealed with the Dinladi family crest. Mr. Balogun looked up and adjusted his glasses before speaking. "Mr. Eze," he began, "I am required to read this aloud." He unfolded the papers, cleared his throat, and read slowly, word by word. "To my son-in-law, Chinedu Eze, for his honesty and loyalty, I leave the controlling shares of my companies and $350 million in assets." Chinedu froze. For a moment he thought he hadn't heard correctly. The room went silent. Even the ticking of the clock faded. His heart began to race as the lawyer's words sank in. The man who had been humiliated, mocked, and cast aside was now heir to a fortune that could change everything. Tears welled up in his eyes. He lowered his head, unable to speak, his breath trembling as the weight of the moment settled over him. Slowly, he looked up to the ceiling and whispered, voice breaking, "You believed in me when no one else did." The lawyer sat quietly, giving him a moment of silence. Outside, the wind rustled through the city, as if the universe itself had paused to acknowledge what had just happened. Chinedu left the office that day with tears, gratitude, and a quiet fire burning inside him. His downfall had been public, but so would his rise. Amira scrolled through her phone, laughter spilling from her lips as flashes from her new life filled the screen. Luxury dinners, nightclub selfies, and fake smiles surrounded by people who didn't care about her story, only her status. She called Chinedu her lazy ex-husband in every conversation, painting herself as the strong woman who escaped a nobody. Her mother cheered her on, whispering, "Find someone richer, someone who'll erase this shame once and for all." Together, they believed they had buried Chinedu for good, forgotten like an old chapter no one would ever reopen. But whispers have wings, and soon they began to flutter through the city. Quiet rumors started in business circles, spreading like wildfire. "Have you heard? Chief Musa's will has been read. His son-in-law inherited everything." At first, Amira dismissed them with a sharp laugh. "Chinedu? My Chinedu? Please," she scoffed, tossing her hair, pretending the very thought amused her. But the laughter felt forced, uneasy. Then one morning, as she sat in her favorite cafe, sipping her overpriced coffee, her phone lit up with a notification. A friend had tagged her in a post from Business Africa Weekly. She opened it casually and froze. On the glossy magazine cover, in a perfectly tailored suit, stood the man she had humiliated. The headline burned like fire across the page. "The unexpected heir Chinedu Eze takes over Dinladi Group." Her breath caught in her throat. The cup slipped from her trembling hands, crashing against the floor as coffee splattered across her dress. The cafe went silent, eyes turning toward her, but all she could see was Chinedu's calm, confident face, the same man she once called useless. Her fingers went numb, her phone sliding from her hand to the table. Memories flooded back. The day she mocked him for dreaming too small, the night she left him without a word, and the look on his face when she signed the divorce papers. Now the whole world was watching him, and by extension her. The man she ridiculed had risen higher than she ever imagined, while she was left choking on the bitterness of regret. In that moment, Amira realized she hadn't just lost a husband, she had lost the only man who truly loved her. That night, Amira couldn't breathe. The image of Chinedu's face on that magazine haunted her. His calm smile, his quiet strength. It was the same look she once dismissed as weakness. Now it terrified her because it meant he no longer needed her. She tossed and turned, replaying every cruel word she'd ever said to him, every moment she'd chosen pride over love. By midnight, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her car keys, tears blurring her vision as she drove straight to the Dinladi Group headquarters, the empire that now belonged to the man she once abandoned. When she entered the tall glass building, every guard, every receptionist stared. They all knew who she was. The ex-wife who had mocked the man now sitting in the chairman's office. Her heels clicked loudly against the marble floor, but her confidence was gone. She was trembling, her heart pounding as she pushed open the office door. Chinedu stood by the window looking out over the city lights, his reflection calm and unbothered. She whispered his name, her voice cracking. "Chinedu." He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Then the tears broke free. "I made a mistake," she sobbed, falling to her knees. "I was scared. I thought you'd never make it. Please, Chinedu, I was wrong. Let's start again. Please." The room went silent. Only her crying filled the air. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he walked toward her. Not with anger, but with a quiet sadness that cut deeper than any shout could. "You divorced a man because he was poor," he said softly. "But you didn't know poverty was temporary. And so was your place in my heart." She looked up at him, broken, unable to speak. The words shattered her. He turned away, his eyes filled with both pain and peace, the peace of someone who had already healed. From the hallway, Madame Zainab watched everything. The woman who once told her daughter to marry for money now stood frozen, her pride collapsing under the weight of her own lessons. For the first time she saw what true wealth looked like, not money, not power, but dignity. And it no longer belonged to them. The grand ballroom of the Hilton Hotel in Lagos shimmered with golden light. Cameras flashed from every corner as journalists, investors, and top executives gathered for one of the most anticipated events of the year, the official press conference introducing Chinedu Eze as the new CEO of the Dunladi Group. Once a quiet man of few words, he now stood tall, dressed in a sharp navy suit, confidence radiating from every movement. The air was thick with admiration and curiosity. Everyone wanted to hear the story of the man who rose from being jobless to becoming one of Nigeria's most powerful businessmen. At the far back of the room, hidden behind a column, Amira stood trembling. Her once glamorous face was pale, her eyes hollow. She thought she could just sneak in quietly, maybe congratulate him privately. But the moment the cameras swung in her direction, whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. "That's his ex-wife," someone muttered. "The one who left him when he lost his job," another added. The sound of her shame filled the room. She tried to lower her head, but the flashbulbs found her anyway. Madame Zainab stood beside her, stiff and silent, her pride dissolving into quiet panic. Meanwhile, Chinedu adjusted the microphone and smiled, completely composed. He could feel every camera on him, every whisper in the air, but his voice was steady, calm, and powerful. "I once thought losing everything was the end of my story," he began. "But sometimes, loss is just life clearing space for something greater." The room fell silent. Every ear leaned closer. Then he paused, glanced subtly toward the back, right where Amira stood, and continued. "The greatest lesson I learned is this. Love built on wealth collapses faster than the wealth itself." A wave of applause thundered through the hall. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. The journalist scribbled his words as if they were gold. But at the back, Amira's knees buckled. Tears rolled down her cheeks silently. The applause felt like a storm washing away her pride. Her mother turned her face away, unable to look at her daughter, or the man she once dismissed. And Chinedu? He simply smiled, not in revenge but in peace, because his silence now spoke louder than any victory ever could. Months passed, and the noise of the world slowly faded behind Chinedu. The tabloids moved on, the whispers died down, and the name Chinedu Eze began to represent something more than a scandal. It became a symbol of quiet strength. He had no interest in revenge, no time for bitterness. Instead, he focused on what truly mattered: purpose. Every morning he arrived at his office before dawn, not to chase profit, but to build legacy. In honor of Chief Musa Dunladi, the man who believed in him when everyone else walked away, Chinedu launched the Dunladi Foundation. Its goal was simple yet powerful: to provide scholarships, mentorship, and seed funding to young Nigerian entrepreneurs with big dreams but little opportunity. On the day of the foundation's opening, the media gathered again. But this time, the story wasn't about drama. It was about redemption. Standing before a hall full of bright-eyed youth, Chinedu spoke with quiet conviction. "What you lose in people," he said, pausing to meet their eyes, "you gain in purpose." Those words became the slogan of the foundation, printed on every banner, engraved in every heart. Dozens of young people began to look up to him, not as a businessman, but as a mentor who turned pain into progress. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment across town, Amira sat by her window, watching the same news broadcast. Her eyes filled with tears, not because she wanted the money or status back, but because she finally saw what she had thrown away. That night, she took a deep breath and wrote a letter. It was long, filled with regret and honesty. Apologies for her pride, her cruelty, her blindness. She admitted that she now understood what real strength looked like. And it wasn't wealth or comfort, it was character. Days later, Chinedu received the letter. He sat in his garden, reading every word carefully. For a moment, a small, sad smile appeared on his face. Then, with calm grace, he tore the paper into small pieces. The wind picked them up one by one, scattering them into the bright Lagos sky. He whispered softly, "Some things are better left in the past." And with that, he turned away, ready to keep building, keep giving, keep rising. The night sky stretched endlessly above Lagos, glowing with the lights of a city that never truly slept. Chinedu stood on the balcony of his new home. A quiet, elegant space that overlooked everything he had once dreamed of but never chased for himself. The soft wind brushed against his face as he looked out over the skyline, the hum of distant traffic mixing with the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. There was peace now, not the kind that comes from luxury, but from survival, healing, and truth. He took a deep breath and whispered to the night, "They left when I had nothing, but losing them gave me everything." The words weren't bitter. They were calm, almost thankful. Because through every heartbreak, every lonely night, every tear shed in silence, he had discovered a deeper strength, the kind that can't be taken away. Behind him, the soft patter of little feet broke his thoughts. A small girl about 6 years old ran into his arms. She was the daughter of his late best friend, the one who had stood by him when no one else did. After the tragedy that took her parents, Chinedu had taken her in without hesitation. Now she was his light, his second chance at love and family. She looked up at him with sleepy eyes and asked, "Daddy, are you okay?" He smiled gently, lifting her into his arms. Her tiny hands rested on his chest and he said softly, "I'm more than okay, my little one. We don't rebuild with bitterness. We rebuild with grace." The words floated in the air like a blessing, gentle, warm, and full of meaning. She giggled, resting her head on his shoulder, and together they stood watching the city, two souls who had found family not by blood, but by choice and love. Inside, the home was filled with laughter again. Not the shallow kind that hides pain, but the deep healing kind that grows after storms. As the camera fades out, the final image lingers. Chinedu holding the child close, the city lights glowing behind them. Success, peace, and the beautiful justice of a man who rose not for revenge, but for redemption.